So I'm going to be talking to you today about a project that Laufey and I are still working on, so it's very much a work in progress, looking at interpreting messages for visitors in natural areas, and we've used Ásbyrgi as a kind of case study for that, as I will explain as we go through. A graph I don't need to show anyone in this room, I know, but it helps us to explain why it's important to look at how we communicate with visitors into the country. And we know that tourist numbers have increased over the last many years and quite rapidly in recent years here in Iceland. Have we got 2018 figures? Does anyone? No? Because there was prediction it was going to be a bit lower. No, it didn't happen?
It was a 5.5% increase.
Okay. All that panic, it was going to be lower, and one of the bus companies saying they were going to stop running buses, and yeah, okay. All right. Didn't happen. Didn't think it was going to, but there was a bit of a panic that maybe the numbers might be going down. So they're still going up, but as important, more important even than just numbers, is the economics of that, because tourism now is very significant economically for Iceland. So as we have increasing numbers coming in and increasing amounts of money coming in, we need to look at ways of effectively managing that, of capturing that for the country then. So there is an increasing need to manage, as we get more numbers, there's an increasing need to manage these numbers. And one of the words that's been, sort of should be two words really, but it's been thrown together as one and been thrown around in the country a lot at the moment, is the idea of over-tourism. Have we actually got too many coming in? Have we reached a saturation point and there's too many tourists? So this conversation, this dialogue is going on amongst people in this department and others around the country. Just checking. For a long time we've talked about sustainability, and we need to keep talking about that, both sustainability of culture and sustainability of the natural environment that people are coming to see. But increasingly we find on social media and blogs, this is a blog, things that say Icelanders are starting to get annoyed with what's going on with tourism. This one is lists 7 things Icelanders apparently hate about tourism. So as we start to get negative words like hate and people talking about bad stuff, it increasingly shows us that we need to manage what's going on. Just before I go to that one of the things that Iceland has done recently is come up with the Icelandic Pledge. I'm sure you're all familiar with this because it's now around in all the tourism spots as well. And it kind of makes a plea to tourists from a moral, ethical kind of perspective, that we employing them to asking them to do the right thing then for us. And Iceland not the only country that's doing this, several others have also decided to have a go at this kind of appealing to the better nature of people, please do the right thing kind of pledge. So with this background of lots of tourism happening, is that over tourism we need to manage this kind of stuff, then what we're interested in looking at is how we manage it in natural areas and national parks, of which Iceland has lots of natural areas, but not so many national parks. Betty Waller is an Australian who has done a lot of work on interpretation, and in one of her recent publications she says that tourism in national parks is essentially about providing an experience for visitors that is going to be memorable, and because we're in a natural area, it's a nature-based kind of experience. So how do we do this, provide that experience while still managing tourism? Before we get to the Ásbyrgi example, I want to just talk about interpretation in case that word is confusing anybody. It's been around for a while. Freeman Tilden came up with a list of 6 principles of interpretation in the 1950s. He was mainly talking about cultural heritage, how we interpret, how we provide information for people about cultural heritage, and lots of people since have come up with lots of different lists of principles. I've put up the one by Beck and Cable because it's fairly recent, it's 2011. They expanded on those original 6 to come up with 15. And as well as looking at how we interpret culture, they also look at how we interpret nature, which is then relevant particularly for Iceland and for our Ásbyrgi example. But really, basically, when we're talking about interpretation, we're talking about communication. How do we communicate? How do we give information to people? And obviously there are lots of different ways of doing that, and lots of different purposes, reasons we might have for doing that as well. Gianna Moscato is another Australian who does interpretation. And I'm not just picking on Australians, as Jessica and I will tell you, they do a lot of work in interpretation. And in a publication from 2004, where she was particularly looking at wildlife tourism interpretation, she says that some of the aims of this is to keep people interested, to stimulate and maintain their interest in a location, but also to provide learning so that they have some education and learn about what's going on. We also want to be able to encourage visitors to do the right thing as part of that interpretation so that we can keep going towards this aim of tourism that is sustainable as possible. And we want them to have a good time, because if they don't have a good time, they won't come back or say nice things to other friends and family about that. We can boil that down to 3 key things, I think, and that list of 15 that I had, the principles that I didn't go through but are in that publication before, we can boil it down to 3 key things. And the one that keeps coming up is experience. How are we interpreting the context so that the visitors have a good experience? How can we teach them about stuff? So what's the education that's going on in there? And then usually we want to do a bit more than that. We want to manage them. We want them to do an appropriate behaviour. So there's a persuasion element in there as well, then, so that we can influence them, hopefully, to do the right thing. As I said before, there are a bunch of different ways we can do interpretation, and signs are probably the most common. We see them everywhere we go. There are signs in the cabin that I stayed in last night telling me what I should and shouldn't do in the cabin. So signs are a really common thing. Brochures, people also pick up and look at and provide information. As Anna Vilborg knows lots about, guides, face-to-face, people you can talk with, provide information. But increasingly we're getting stuff that's coming to us electronically as well. So we're looking at things online to get information, and we're looking at things like apps and blogs and so on to get information. Signs, as I said, probably the most common, and ones that I think we need to be really careful about. We've got necessary time to have a break and have a joke, I think. It's an old one from nearly 20 years ago, and obviously it's implying that tourists are stupid, which is why there's no point giving them signs. You might as well talk to the animals. And that's not the message I'm trying to get across. But the message I'm trying to get across is that we do need to be wary about signs. We've lots of literature that shows that if we do too many signs, people stop paying attention to them. They just go to information overload. I'm not interested anymore. Also, the context, sometimes you just don't want lots of signs, particularly if it's a natural area setting. And signs can be unreliable, I have found in Iceland anyway. We were walking up, I didn't put the picture in, but I was walking up through Fama at the back of Hamstongi a few days ago when there actually had been lots of ice and snow, briefly, and all the signs were covered. You couldn't actually read any of them at this time of year because they're covered in a thick barrier of ice, and you wonder what it says, but you have no idea of finding out. When I was working here, I was also working at the Cellar Centre, and the Cellar Centre has big seal-shaped wooden signs out on the main road, ring road, encouraging people to turn in to come to the Cellar Centre. And at the beginning of one winter, in a particularly big storm, one of them disappeared. And about 3 months later, towards the end of the winter, a farmer, not very happy, about 1 kilometre away from there, rang and said that the sign was in his paddock. Could we please come and move it? So there's also winds that blow over signs in this country. So my point is that maybe signs aren't always the best thing, and we should be looking at other ways of doing our interpretation. So, Ásbyrgi, everybody knows where this one is, and I'm hoping that most of you have been, maybe even several times. So in the northernmost part of Vatnajokull National Park, It's got a campsite, a visitor centre, lots of nice walks you can do of varying lengths around that area. Increasingly people are coming in to do mountain biking type activities as well. And because it's always fun to put the acknowledgements in the middle of a presentation instead of the end, the project was done as, it's still being done as a collaboration between Griffith, where I am, Holar, here where Laufey is, and the Icelandic Tourism Research Centre where Woodland Flora is. So we've had support from all of those places, which has made this possible then. In terms of how we collected the data, we got a research permit from Vatnajokull National Park, because you can't just go in there and do stuff without talking to them and making sure they're happy with it. We also got ethical clearance from Griffith University. Griffith has an animal research ethics committee and a human research ethics committee, so because we were dealing with people, we went through the long and arduous process of coming up with a permit number from them to say yes, what we were doing was ethical and they were okay about us doing that. We collected empirical data during August of last year, doesn't feel that long ago, and we did observations of visitors in the park. We went there and stayed for a few days and observed what people were doing and kept records of that, which I will explain in a moment. Then we then came away and on the basis of that designed what we were going to do interview-wise. We did interviews both in Ásbyrgi and Akureyri, and we went back and did more observations in Ásbyrgi then as well. We're in Iceland, it's always fun to talk about the weather. And it was colder then than it is now. That was August, it was meant to be warmer. So the days were averaging somewhere between 6 and 9 degrees, and it was wet most of the time. Not necessarily heavy rain a little bit, but often it was just drizzle, unpleasant drizzle. And if that stopped and it wasn't wet or windy, then those little mitty sandfly things came and got in your eyes and your mouth, and there were people trying to talk to you doing it to get them away. So mention the weather conditions because they influence the activity that people are going to do in that park and also influence what we could do as well. So there were times when we just would go, it's not working, and sit in the visitor centre and wait for the horrible weather to go away because nobody wants to talk to us standing around in the pouring rain. So talk about the observations first and then the interviews. We did observations at 3 locations. So at the main entrance where people walk down to the pond, and that's the main walk that people do. It's the shortest one, it's arguably one of the prettiest ones, and so it's where most of the people tend to go. It comes from the parking area, people can drive down into that area and then walk through, and there are 3 fairly large signs that people get information from about the park at that point. We also did observations actually at the pond at the end of that trail, so where people sit down or stand on a viewing platform, and there are some small signs down there that explain what the birds are or aren't, what birds would be there if they were there on that viewing platform. We also did observations in the visitor centre, but I'm not going to talk about that one today. For these observations we timed people, so when they arrived at that location, when they left, so we knew how long they were there. We also looked at group composition. Was it someone on their own? Were they in a large group? Was it a family, etc.? What they were actually doing in that location. And if there was anything else we could get from just watching them, such as gender and age, and if we were hearing them speak, then possibly a nationality out of that language, those kinds of things we recorded as well. So some of our results from that, we looked at at the trail entrance. We observed 72, not 72 people, because some were singles and some were groups, so 72 units. Units? Yeah, all right. Feels funny calling a person a unit. Not near that microphone, am I? 72 units of people, and there were some that just walked straight past and didn't stop and look at those 3 big signs at all. But most people were spending a couple of minutes, a minute or 2 maybe, looking at those signs. There's one outlier that's skewed this result that I'll talk about in a moment, but certainly it was very rare to see people going past 2 or 3 minutes of standing at those signs then. In terms of the pond, we didn't observe as many units down there, but they were staying longer. So most people, once they got down to that pond area, even though there aren't signs to look at, just the little bird ones, and several people I spoke to afterwards said they didn't even remember seeing those, they're sitting down at the pond, they may be taking photos, they may be looking at their phone, or they may be just standing around observing that view is what most people are doing in that context, and staying quite a reasonable amount of time then down in that location. So people are spending more time down at the pond. So just a few notes about those observations. How long they're spending obviously can be influenced by a whole bunch of factors. One of those is going to be how many other people are there. So some of the people who walked straight past the signs at the trail entrance did that because there was already a whole group of people there and they couldn't see, they didn't want to stand around and wait, so they just moved on. Sometimes they didn't stay because it was just too wet and they just wanted to get to where they were going and get back to their warm car. And sometimes it was a timing factor. The big buses that tend to come in, the guides on the buses talk to them about where they're going before they get there. They offload them and say, you're going there, you're coming straight back, you've got X minutes, go, get on with it. So that tends to keep them moving then as well. And then this outlier at the trail entrance that I mentioned, there was one couple who would look like they were probably about 30 who stood there for nearly 7 minutes. Nobody else did anything like that. I'm like, you're messing up my data. Move on here. But they weren't going into the park at that point, they were coming back, or down to the pond, they were coming back. So, and the weather was nice and there was nobody else around. They took photos of the signs, they chatted to each other, they did, a few other things but they were sort of standing still around in that area. So that's what's messed up the data of making it look like people were staying there a little bit longer, just that one couple. So the next highest group, for example, was a group that came through with 8 people and they had a guide, and the guide stood there and translated those signs for them, and they were still only there less than 3 minutes. So really unusual for someone to be more than 3 minutes at that particular location. We will move on to the interviews then, because we wanted to make sure we had a mixed method approach to this and data from a few different sources and ways of getting that. So we talked to managers and rangers and guides, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm just going to talk about the visitors, and we did interviews with 120 visitors. Most of those were in that car park at the entrance down to the pond, so where these photos are then taken. A small number were at the campsite once they'd been down into the area and gone back and set up camp. There were a couple at the visitor centre, and there were some unbothered in Ackbury once they got back off tours that had been to Ásbyrgi. But certainly the majority coming from interviews we did in that location right there at the trail as they came back off the trail. And there are 3 bits I want to talk about with these. The data we've got in terms of who it is that's coming into the park from these interviews, why they are coming there, and also what they said about the interpretation that is available in that area or could potentially be available for them in that area. So in terms of who visits the park, we were just doing this over a couple of weeks in August, so it would be really interesting to look at different months and see if that influences people coming in. But the largest group by far was German, and I've chucked a couple of Austrians into that same red patch because we've got the same language group there if we were thinking about languages we were putting on for the signs. So the largest single group came from Germany. The blue one is Iceland, so we had some Icelanders coming in as well. The grey is USA, Canada, which I've also put together. And I know this looks enormous, the rest of Europe one, but what we've got there was just small numbers. So when I divided it all up, it was just tiny little bits. So we've got people from the Netherlands and Denmark and Italy and Spain and Portugal. Those were probably France.
Italian, did they say that?
Italy, yeah. So those, but not a lot of numbers in each of those groups. So I thought that was interesting. And the fluoro yellow at the top is the rest of the world. There were a couple of Australians and New Zealanders, but not many. But some of the things I thought was really interesting was that there was absolutely nobody from Asia, and there was only one person who identified as being Polish. And given that there are Polish people in the country, perhaps it suggests they're not travelling, or they weren't at that particular period of time. Obviously, we've got some biases in here in that we were only doing the interviews in either English or Icelandic, so we just kept a record of that as well, and we had 10 people say, I don't want to do these interviews because I don't feel confident to do it in English or Icelandic. And we had 9 people who said, I'm in too much of a rush to stop. I'm hungry, I'm wet, I'm cold. But our response rate then was pretty good. We didn't get many people say no. In terms of why they're coming, obviously, and almost anywhere you go in Iceland and ask people this question, they say they're here for the nature or they're here for the geology. So that's the very common response, and Ásbyrgi no different from that. One of the things that surprised me that I didn't already know was that the people are going there because their travel agent told them to. So they have, most of them were self-drive tours, have driven themselves into the area. We found it very difficult to talk to bus people, which is why we talked to some back in Vatnajokull, because they were in a hurry to get back on the bus and their bus driver didn't want us to hold them up, so we didn't talk to them. But the self-drive said, well, I'm here because, look, it's on my, I was told. So I went to my travel agent in Germany or the Netherlands. They said, yes, we will organise your entire trip to Iceland, and here's what you will do. You arrive here, you pick up your car here, you drive here, here's the map, you stay at this hotel, and you go here. So why are you here? Well, because I was told to come here. Did you know anything about it before you came? Often the answer was no. Did you stop at the visitor centre? Oh, was there one? It's not on my piece of paper. So no. So a lot were just based purely on they'd been told it was part of their organised trip. People were also looking at information in guidebooks and online and finding out about it. People were also saying it's off the main ring road, so we wanted to go somewhere that was a bit different from one of the main tourist attractions. And obviously if they're on tour buses, they're going where the tour bus takes them. So there was, I thought, surprisingly little amount of people saying, we've researched Ásbyrgi, this particular place, and we wanted to come here. So what, in terms of the interpretation, what did people that we spoke to, those 120 visitors, want out of that? And we're still working on the analysis of this, but it's really mixed results so far. In terms of what people say, that their happiness with what's there, but no, they're mainly happy with what's there. But in terms of what they might like to see different or change, then there's quite a mixed response then to that. So most were pretty happy with what's there, and what's there is a few signs, then in the locations where we were talking to people. Some said they would like more information, and again that geology stuff came up as something they were really interested in, the canyon and how it was formed, and would like to know more about that. There were others that had read then perhaps a little bit on the sign or somewhere about the hidden people, and so wanted to know more about that as well. And there were people that just said, well, everything. I'd like to know more about everything, the birds and the plants and everything that is here. Which is kind of big and broad for us to try and deal with then. We also asked specifically about the signs, and there were some people that said, what signs? I don't remember seeing any signs. I didn't read any signs. There were others that said signs are great, I love signs and I would like to see more signs. But there were also quite a lot of people who said, what's there is okay, don't put in any more. What we're dealing with is this lovely natural environment, and I don't actually want to see signs every couple of steps as I walk along. They get in the way of what I was doing. So anticipating that kind of result, we asked people as well what they would like instead. And maybe it's because I've got teenage children, but they spend what seems like 23 hours of their day doing this. And so we said, well, what about if you had something available on a smartphone as an app kind of thing? And there were some people that said, oh yeah, that's an interesting kind of idea. But there were also a lot that said, no, I wouldn't use it. And I will explain that bit a little bit more as we get to a conclusion slide. So some of our conclusions from this early part of just looking at the visitor data, not the rest of it yet, is that most of the visitors are really satisfied with the interpretation at Ásbyrgi, said it was pretty good, they're happy with it, there was certainly no complaints. Someone who'd been on a long walk across the top of the canyon where there were coloured poles for different paths said they got confused because they couldn't remember which colour they were meant to be following on their walk, and so they thought that should be clearer, but very few complaints about the interpretation. Most people said they were quite satisfied with that. When we asked them responses about the signs, as I just said, that was quite mixed, particularly when we said, was there enough signs in that area? Some people thought yes, some thought no. And some were quite receptive to the idea of an app. There was one particular enthusiastic guy from the US who said, yeah, absolutely, that's the way to go. You want apps, you want stuff on the phone. But most weren't. Didn't like this idea at all, which again, perhaps naively came as a little bit of a surprise to me. It's the teenage boy thing, I think. So that was a surprise. And there were two key reasons for that. One was they said they didn't want to use the data. So if they had to use data to access the stuff that was on their phone, they hadn't necessarily bought a card, a SIM card or something to come into the country. They didn't want to use their own because it would cost them a lot to use their data roaming from home, etc. So some then said, well, if there was free Wi-Fi here and I could do it that way, then yes. So exploring that a bit more and saying, well, what if it was something downloadable that you could put on there before you came? So at first we were talking about perhaps scanning a barcode or something to get information, but if it was something you could download before, would you look at it? Again, a few people said, yeah, maybe, but again, probably the majority saying no, because it doesn't fit with the context. I'm here, I'm in nature, I want to be looking at this stuff up here, I don't want to be doing this. And that probably depends a lot on the age of the people we were talking to as well. So there was sort of a grouping around 30, but then the bigger grouping of people would have been 50 plus that were going into that area that we spoke to. So perhaps feeling like they can be disconnected from their smart device at 50 plus, a little bit more than someone who's in their 20s and 30s then, perhaps. And despite people saying, I don't want to spend my whole time looking at it, we certainly observed a lot of people who were looking at it anyway, when they were down at the pond and in other places. So those seem to be the two main reasons why people said, yeah, maybe not an app. And then another one perhaps of interest to that specific area is that, as I said earlier on with the observations, people were spending more time at the pond. So if they are spending more time at the pond, perhaps this is a location where we could look more at interpretation. And people generally aren't looking at the photos of the birds very much. And that again is probably because there's a sign that says you might see this bird, and a picture of the bird, and you look around and you don't, and you go, that's not here. No, that one's not here either. So they're not paying much attention to those signs even if they notice them. Another thing that could happen at this location, because I'm not necessarily suggesting signs, but a guide who was occasionally wandering around that could stop and answer people's questions, and Ásbyrgi is starting to do that. Over the summer months, they just stopped, I think, towards the end of July, then into August when we were there. But as people are spending time at that spot, someone wandering around who could perhaps answer questions if they had them might be worth considering then at that location. Where we are going next with this, This was just reporting on the interviews and on observations of the visitors. So we haven't yet gone through the data that we've got with the managers and the rangers and the guides. Often they were driver guides on the buses. So we asked them the same sort of questions in terms of, do you think, you know, are you happy with the interpretation? Do you think there should be more signs? Do you think people would use an app? That kind of stuff. But we also asked them more, our visitor stuff is about experience, education and persuasion, the three that I mentioned at the beginning. Visitors was mainly about the experience. How's the experience for you? We're getting more from these interviews about the education and the persuasion side of that then. So what would you like people to know and how can we perhaps, you know, model that? How can we put that information forward for you? And some of the things that came up from those were concerns by managers and rangers and guides were about safety, which we know comes up all the time, but also about disturbance in that area. The last time I was at Ásbyrgi, these signs didn't exist and they were relatively new in August. And this is a problem that natural areas and even international airports, is that what we talked about last night? Drones at Heathrow? I can't remember. But natural areas, increasingly people are thinking it's okay to take in these drone stuff. And in somewhere like Ásbyrgi that has a lot of birds, that's disturbing the birds. So managers concerned about this kind of stuff and how we can get people to do the right thing and not fly drones. Because even though the signs were there, on a couple of occasions I heard drones, but then actually finding them, by the time you get down there and find the person who's got the drone, they're well gone still. So it's that kind of information, more the education side and the persuasion side, that we're hoping we will get out of the interviews then. We also want to look at how this little study fits nationally, so what kind of information exists surrounding policies at a national framework in terms of interpretation, what's being done and looked at across the country and how this kind of stuff can fit in. And we very much formulated as an experiment, as a little pilot project, as something to see whether this was going to work and what sort of information we could get and what was the best way of getting it. Hence the two phases of going into Ásbyrgi. So in the perfect world, we extend it out to look at other locations and we get more money to be able to do that. Are there any questions?